Welcome to Simplify to Scale, a show dedicated to helping you scale a high impact and high profit business that you love without all of the complexity and chaos that can keep you trapped in the day-to-day. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and with decades of scaling experience, I know what actually works and what's just hype. So if you are done with all of the one-size-fits-all scaling advice and all of the overnight success promises, and instead you want proven practical strategies that will help you simplify operations, elevate your leadership, amplify profits, and scale sustainably, let's dive in and get started. Hello, and welcome to the Simplify to Scale show. Today, we're going to be talking about scalable growth, and we're going to be talking about this as an extension of what I brought up in our last episode, which was why it is so critical to simplify before you scale. And I walked you through the 4 different stages that most offers go through, as well as most businesses go through, which is emerge, grow, scale, sustain. And today I wanted to talk specifically about when you're in the growth stage and how you can prepare yourself for scale by focusing in on scalable growth. And there is a really big difference between scalable growth and the growth that most businesses experience. Growth is something that very much gets glamorized, and it's absolutely something that we want to achieve in our business. However, the side effect of a lot of the ways that most companies grow is all of the complexity and the chaos and the being trapped in the day-to-day and things feeling very unsustainable. As we talked about a little bit in last week's episode, a lot of times during growth, your revenue may be up, but your expenses are raising at an even greater rate. You're bringing on more team, you're investing in more systems and infrastructure. You just have a lot of investments going out, and therefore your profitability is down. So while growth can feel very exciting, it can feel very exhilarating sometimes, especially as you see your impact expanding, you see your revenue expanding. A lot of times growth can be a bit misleading in that it feels like really great progress and momentum forward, but behind the scenes, it is a full-on scramble. It's chaotic, it's draining, and it's completely and entirely unsustainable. And as I shared in last week's episode, it's from that place that a lot of people will try to scale, not realizing that scaling is an amplifier that just gives you more of what you already have. And therefore, it is absolutely critical that you are simplifying before you scale because you do not want more of that. You want more of the positive sides of growth without more of all of the side effects and the growing pains that come with growth, especially rapid growth. But what I wanted to talk about specifically in today's episode to kind of dig a little bit deeper into this is the difference between that type of growth. And that type of growth is what I refer to as effort-driven growth. What I want to dive into in today's episode as an extension of our conversation last week is the different ways that you can approach growth. And all of that very hectic and unsustainable approach is what most people just call growth. It is what I call effort-driven growth. And I use that term very specifically because I think it highlights exactly what's wrong with that kind of growth versus what I think actually set your business up for the type of scale and success long-term and sustainability that you want, which is scalable growth. They're a very different way to approach how you're growing your business. And so if you are not yet in the place where you are scaling your business and you are still in that growth period, you don't want to wait until you're ready to scale to simplify. You want to start focusing on scalable growth right now. And the thing is, once you nail the scalable growth approach and patterns that work really well in your business, there's something you're going to continue for the entire life cycle of your business. So let's break things down. Right. A lot of times in a period of growth, you are working with more clients. And in order to support that, you're bringing on more team members. You're investing in more systems, more tools, more infrastructure. There's more services sometimes that you're providing, or more customizations, or more things that you're just experimenting with. Growth is very much a period of experimentation. And a lot of times, It's figuring out what's working so you know what to actually scale. It's figuring out which marketing approaches to leverage, which channels to use. Should you be on LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram or Facebook? Should you have a podcast? Should you start a Substack? Like, what way are you going to raise visibility, get in front of your ideal clients? Are you going to do speaking? Going to host events, right? There's so many different things to figure out what that engine is that gives you the repeatable growth in your business, which is what you need in order to transition into scale. But the way that most people approach that is very much a way of more. They're adding more things. And by doing so, they're really growing in more of an effort driven way, where every dollar that they're bringing in, they need to work harder in some way, shape, or form, whether that's more hours or whether that's more tools or technology or more people. There's resources that are increasing to support the growth. That is what I call effort driven growth. Revenue increases, but so does the effort and so do the expenses. And this, of course, is where burnout comes in because the only way to keep on growing is to keep doing more. And there's a million and one strategies out there for how you can stop doing more by automating things, by bringing in the right team. And all of those are valid and helpful, yes. But what you really need is not to have your growth be effort driven, whether it's your effort or whether it's your team's effort. If it's dependent on effort, there is going to either be a ceiling on your growth itself won't be sustainable, or you are at very high risk for burnout yourself or for your team. So I really wish instead of calling it growth or explosive growth or rapid growth or put whatever acronym in front of the word growth, quantum growth, I don't know, there's a million and one different ways that growth get described. Instead of just calling it all those words that make it sound kind of sexy and glamorous, I wish that people just called it effort driven growth to make it really clear what it is and why it serves a place in your business journey, but it is not the be all end all. It's not where you want to stop. And it is not the place in which you, as the founder of the business, can experience freedom. If you are in an effort driven growth model, it is incredibly challenging to get yourself out of the day to day and to not have things be dependent on you, regardless of the systems and team you put in place. Possible? Yes. Probable? No. So what do? What you want to do is you want to switch away from the typical model of more effort driven growth to a much more sustainable model of scalable growth. If your growth isn't scalable, it's not going to solve problems, it's going to amplify them, right? If your operations are really clunky, if you struggle to keep up with onboarding, well, what do you think is going to happen when all of a sudden you double the number of people that you need to onboard? If your systems are kind of half baked, if they live in someone's head, usually yours, and you need those systems to actually serve the new demand in the business, well, that's going to increase dependency on you. It's going to increase room for possible issues. And if it's something related to the client experience, it is likely going to make the client experience suffer. And if delivery is dependent on you, or if it's dependent on a couple of key resources on your team, then that capacity becomes the bottleneck. And that becomes your ceiling on your growth potential. And this is something that a lot of founders struggle with, and not all of them talk about it because there's almost what I call the illusion of success. Because from the outside looking in, things look really good. Growth is very visible, whereas scaling isn't always quite as visible. And so growth is flashier. People see that you just had 100 or 1,000 people join your program. People see that you just sold out an event. People see that you just hit the bestsellers list. People can see what looks like success from the outside. And behind the scenes, it doesn't actually look that way. So while it looks all shiny and you're getting questions like, what are you doing? What are you doing that's working so well? Behind the scenes, you feel almost a little bit like a fraud because you're like, if anybody ever knew that this entire thing is held together by duct tape and bubble gum, it's about to fall down at any moment. I'm not even quite sure how we are getting half of this stuff done, right? It's a very stressful place for a lot of founders, and they feel this very invisible weight on their shoulders. Like, how do I sustain this? How do I make what people perceive as success feel real instead of like it's all going to fall apart? And that was very much where I found myself when I scaled my first business really rapidly. I've talked about that in prior episodes, but I was getting questions left and right from everyone. They could see my outward success. It was very visible. And everyone wanted to know what I was doing and what my secret was, and I was getting a lot of attention for my growth, which was great and encouraging and felt really good in a lot of ways, but behind the scenes, we were scrambling so badly trying to keep up, and I started to hope that people would stop placing orders because I wasn't sure how we were gonna actually fulfill them. There were not any more hours in the day to do it. Our systems were not keeping up with our demand, and it was just complete and utter chaos. So while it looked great from the outside, it did not feel great behind the scenes, and I was constantly worried that I was not gonna be able to sustain the success, and at the same time, I was working so many hours. I was in such a state of stress all the time. I had a lot of health concerns. I had a lot of other things that were happening. And although that for me was a product-based business, I've experienced similar things in service-based businesses, and it's something a lot of founders experience and don't always outwardly talk about because they don't want to impact the outward illusion of success. And it can absolutely lead to a full-on crash. It could lead to burnout, could lead to resentment. This is where people sometimes kinda just burn it all to the ground and step away, and their clients or the people in their community are left wondering why would they do that? Everything looked so successful. That is frequently when you have an effort-driven growth scenario. When you have scalable growth, it looks very different. This is where you can continue to expand the business in a way that does not require a linear increase in the effort, in the resources, in the team size. This is ultimately what scaling looks like. But you don't have to wait to be fully scaling to start to put these practices in place. You can put these practices in place when you are in a period of growth instead of waiting for the transition to scale. So, effort driven growth, if you think about it from a time perspective, more hours are typically what deliver more revenue. Whereas in scalable growth, you can achieve more revenue with the same or fewer hours. When you look at your team and effort driven growth, more people equals more output. Whereas in scalable growth, it's better systems equal more output. So, yeah, you have your team and you grow that team as you need to, but you're really much more dependent on the entire system. And I don't mean system as an SOP or even as a tool, I mean the system, like your client delivery system. What does that look like? What does it take to deliver an exceptional client experience? That is going to include people, it's going to include processes, it's going to include technology. There's different elements that are going into it, but you're focused more on the system as a whole, and you're putting in place the different parts and pieces of that system, whether it be people related, process related, tool and tech related, to achieve the specific outcomes that you have. But that's how you're approaching it as opposed to, I'm just going to bring in more people and let them figure it out. Very, very different approach. Your role in effort driven growth, you have to stay involved in everything. Oftentimes, there's not enough time to get things out of your head, and things are moving so quickly, typically, when you are in a period of effort driven growth, that it becomes very difficult for you to take a step back, even if everything wasn't dependent on you, which it typically is. Whereas when you have scalable growth, you really are much more of that visionary leader, and your team takes on ownership of a lot of the execution. Doesn't mean you don't still play a critical role in delivery, depending on the way you have your business model structured, but you don't have to be involved in things outside of the things that you should be involved in as the founder of your business, given the specific model that you've chosen for your business. And in effort driven growth, one of the biggest side effects, one of the biggest challenges is that profit ends up being very flat where it actually declines even as revenue goes up. And that can be really tough. On paper, you look and you're like, I doubled how much I made this year and I can no longer pay myself, right? I see this with founders all the time. It's like, I don't understand. I'm making so much more money. How is it that I can't even make payroll? Or how is it that cash flow has become such a challenge? I didn't used to have this challenge. And that's because you're typically approaching growth in more of that effort driven way, where it requires more resources, more time, more of all of the things in order to serve the additional clients that you brought in coupled with the revenue you're bringing in. In scalable growth, you're actually increasing your margins as you scale, which is really the name of the game. Of course, I will say this 1,000 times over. It's why you want to scale. You don't want to stay in a period of growth forever. You want to move into a period of scale, which really is much more about profitability. It's more about optimization. It's more about amplification. It is not about addition. Effort driven growth is much more about addition. Scalable growth is much more about amplification of what's working. You're leaning out and simplifying everything that's not that, and then you're going all in and amplifying what is. And so effort driven growth typically very challenging for you to take time away or step away from the business because there is so much dependence on you and so much complexity and moving parts. Whereas in scalable growth, that is where you can actually take a real vacation, one where you do not bring your laptop with you, one where you do not have to check in or get interrupted. And it does not have to be this monumental thing. You could take vacation regularly. It lets you get back time while increasing your impact and increasing your profit. And so scalable growth, absolutely the way that you want to go and what you want to get to. And of course, given those two options, you're like, well, yeah, of course I want scalable growth. Why would I pick effort driven growth instead of scalable growth? And the thing is, it's because it's typically not a choice and it's not an intention that a business owner thinks to make. It is one you absolutely can make. It is one I encourage you to make. Everything you do in your business, you should do very strategically and intentionally. And if you approach growth strategically and intentionally, you can set yourself up for scalable growth instead of effort driven growth. But here's some of the things that get in the way and that can cause businesses to end up in a cycle of effort driven growth, which honestly is typical growth. Very few people master scalable growth. And those that do are typically multi founders. So they figured it out the hard, painful, expensive way with a previous business or previous businesses, or they're smart and savvy enough to recognize the importance of investing in a scaling expert, working with a business like what my team and I do to actually go in and help them approach the way that they are growing and scaling their business different from what the majority of businesses do because they know they do not want the same results that the majority of businesses get. The majority of businesses will never get to multi six figures. Even those that do, there is such a smaller percentage of those that will ever get to seven. And those who get to seven, there's very few that will ever get to multi seven, and the list just keeps shrinking as you try to look at eight and beyond. And yet, so many businesses follow and model themselves after the businesses that are struggling instead of modeling themselves after or partnering with someone who is an expert at helping them do the things different enough that they get the different results. So they are the business that breaks into multi seven or eight figures. And so, if you're trying to figure this all out on your own, thank you for tuning into the podcast because so much of what I share here are things that you can take action on to really support yourself right away. And when the time is right, of course, my team and I are always here to work with you on a much closer basis. Scalable growth requires quite a bit of intention. It's something that you do have to choose, and it's something that you need to architect in the business. It takes you stepping into the role of visionary leader. in building the ecosystem around you that makes scale possible and scalable growth possible. And so here's the type of changes that you need to commit to for scalable growth to be possible. The first one is simplifying and streamlining your offer suite. You want repeatable, proven systems. You want some kind of signature framework or offer so you're not competing on price where what you're doing is more commoditized or where things are so boutique that you're inventing things every single time. So you don't get those economies of scale in the work that you're doing because it's custom building every engagement. And I say this as someone who offers boutique scaling services. And so the way to do that as you offer boutique services, if that's part of your model, if what you do is highly customized to a client's needs, just as the work that my team and I do is you have a signature framework and a signature system behind the scenes. As you know, you hear me talk all the time about SPSTI. Those are the 5 gears that need to turn in your business. They all need to be continuously up-leveled in your business. So I know when I'm working with a client, I'm going to be working on SPSTI. The question becomes, which gear am I turning first? Which gear is going to unlock the most leverage in the business? And then from there, what do I do next? So the specific roadmap I follow, the specific things that we do are based on the client's unique situation, their unique vision, their unique business model, their unique challenges, their unique opportunities. It is super highly customized and boutique in that way from the results that they get, but it is based on 5 repeatable, proven methods that I have used for decades with businesses. And so, even though it feels highly boutique to the client that I'm working with, and it absolutely is in a lot of ways, for me and my team, it's really simple to deliver. It's simple to create proposals. It's simple to get clients to and be able to showcase results. And it's because we have a very consistent structure and a proven framework that we have used over and over and over again with clients for decades. So having things be simple and streamlined does not mean that they need to be templated or generic or boring or not custom or not personalized. But what you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel every single time. You also do not want so many different offers and so many different steps within those offers. Simple is definitely better. And I see so much complexity in people's offer suites. Quite often, when I'm working with clients, one of the places that we end up spending a lot of time that they didn't expect when they first started working with me is on their offer suite. They frequently think I need to hire more team or I need to put better systems in place. And so they're thinking very much at the problem that they could see right in front of them, but they're not always recognizing that the root cause of that problem and the thing that actually needs to shift is their offers themselves, the way that they're packaged, the way they're priced, the way they're positioned, the journey that clients go through when they work with them. There is almost always a much simpler and much more profitable solution that sometimes people can't see. But either way, you want to shift to simpler, more streamlined offers. And a lot of times that is removing really heavy customization. Personalization is good. Heavy customization, where you're reinventing things from scratch every time, that will put a huge cap on your scalability and it will keep you trapped in effort driven growth instead of scalable growth. The second one is shifting from being very founder reliant to being more systems reliant. So you want the business to run on systems as opposed to running on knowledge that lives in your head. And I just wrapped up my CSOO call. Every single Tuesday, I meet with my group who are going through and getting certified in my lean scaling system. And we have really great conversations about some of the challenges that they're facing as they're helping businesses scale. And one of the ones that came up was, what do I do when there's a founder who I'm trying to work with and they have way too much dependent on them. They're trying to get out of the day to day. It's what they brought me in for. Yet they're really pushing back about creating systems and feel like they can't actually systematize any of the things that they do. And I hear this all the time. I see this quite a bit in businesses that I go into or founders that I talk to, where on one hand, they say, I hate that everything is dependent on me. And on the other hand, as soon as we start talking about systems, they immediately are like, whoa, 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 no, no, no. I mean, there's no way I could ever turn this into a system. I've been doing this for all this time. And it becomes this wall where as much as they don't want the dependency on them, they can't see a way where somebody else could do it as well as them, or it could ever be systematized. So they just kind of shut down and end up keeping that reliance on them. And that puts a ceiling on things and it very much puts the business into an effort driven growth model. And so, what I was explaining to them in the call tonight, which I'll share here also, is there are absolutely certain things where, as a founder, especially if you're someone who's been doing something for such a long period of time, when you're approaching something, it's not that you're just following these nice, concrete, super simple step 1 through step 10, here you go, anybody else can do it. You are assimilating all of the different things through your unique perspective and experiences that you just can feel like you inherently know the answer. And it would be very hard for somebody else to ever get that same answer because they don't have the same depth of experience that you do. And they don't have all of the different filters that are running through their head in the same way that they are in yours that might make it very simple for you to see the solution or to give an answer on something where somebody else, it can feel really challenging to think that they'd ever be able to do it or do it in the way that you would. And that is a very real thing, right? This was a big challenge for me when I decided to certify people in my methods and to teach people how to go out and scale businesses. And how do I take the thing that I've done for more than 3 decades and put it in a way where I can not only teach people what to do, but I could teach them how I think. I could teach them how to walk into a situation and be able to assess it and be able to know what to do and be able to know how to support that business in the way that is the best and most high leveraged way for the business without having done it as many times as I have or having lived through as many different things and market shifts and everything else as I have. And so I had to really challenge myself with that one to look at how could I systematize what I do fully to be able to entrust someone else to take what I do and be able to do it with basically like my name on it, but I'm not the one doing it. And so that was quite a big leap. And it was something that I worked towards and I absolutely did it. So whenever somebody says you can't do it, you can. But I also don't want to minimize how challenging that can really be. That can be one of the most challenging pieces to systematize and to have somebody else do. So, what I always tell people, and what I was explaining to them tonight is you don't start there. You don't start with that like signature thing that the founder does, whether that's you or whether that's a founder that you're working with if you work with other businesses. That's not where you start with systems. What you do is you systematize absolutely everything else so that the founder can actually do that thing that they do incredibly well. And that thing that really right now only they can do because it goes through a whole bunch of experiences and filters in their brain that are really challenging to turn into something that somebody else could do in the same way. But there is probably so many other things, if that's you, that is on your plate right now that could come off your plate. And so that is where you want to systematize absolutely everything else. So when you're able to make this shift, you start with everything that you can possibly systematize first. And this isn't just you. You wanna do this with what others on your team do as well, and then eventually you could tackle the big challenging thing last, and you sometimes don't even ever need to tackle that. Depends on how involved in the business you wanna be and the role that you wanna play. But your business as a whole should shift to being more systems reliant versus founder reliant, at least in all of the areas that it can. You wanna shift from being a culture of task management to inspired ownership. You want people to own outcomes and own results instead of just checking things off a list and executing tasks. And the only way that that actually happens is if you have actual strategic planning in place. If you are setting clear goals, if people know what the priorities are, if people know directionally where the business is going and what the focus is in the next 90 days, 30 days, this week. People need to know what success looks like, and they need clarity in order to have an ownership culture versus a task by task culture. In order to actually get people to own things, meaning you don't have to tell them what to do and check every single thing that they do. You can't do that really well if you don't have solid planning in place. The more proactive you can be with your planning, the less reactive you need to be in your decisions, in your input, in putting out fires, solving problems, right? As I shared before, effort driven growth tends to be a highly reactive state. Scalable growth, much more proactive. You're looking at where you're going and you're making decisions based on what's going to be needed to support and sustain the next level before you get there instead of reactively. And as you can imagine, right, all of these things, when we look at scalable growth, sound positive. Of course, that's what you want to get to, but it also very much protects your energy. Burnout, a lot of times, isn't just from the amount of hours that you're working, it's the type of work that you're doing, it's the level of stress that you're experiencing, it's the amount of love that you have for the things that you're doing versus all of the other minutiae and things that you're involved in that just frustrate and drain the ever loving life out of you. Right. Scalable growth can be as much of a almost well-being strategy as it is a business strategy. You might not think so, but it just helps protect your energy because you're not constantly putting out fires. You're not constantly in reactive mode, meaning you have no idea what's coming. Your team knows what to do without needing your input every single step along the way, which gives you space to actually think and to create and to lead instead of manage and micromanage. It lets you take time off. It lets you protect time to work on the business and actually be the visionary CEO that you are. And it lets you actually enjoy the business that you've built. And that looks and feels so entirely different than even if you're working the same number of hours, but all of that time is reactive firefighting, cat herding, draining activities, right? All time is not created equal. And so scalable growth is good for the bottom line for sure, but it's also good for you and your mental and physical health. And when you have that type of stronger energy, when you have that type of stronger structure in place, it helps you attract better clients and retain better team members and generate more profit without all of the stress and the weight that can sometimes come with that. But to wrap things up here, effort driven growth, also just called growth, is what typically creates a whole lot of stress. It causes more work. It causes more complexity. It causes more noise and chaos, causes more frustration. And in the end, it's not the way that you need to approach growth. Scalable growth is about doing things differently. It's about doing things in the way. It's about creating the systems and the team and the structures that allow the business to grow without needing more of you. It allows you to create new capacity in the business and build something that's actually sustainable. And scalable growth is something that you can start transitioning to right now. It is how I recommend all growth happens in the business. Whether you are in the stage of business known as growth or the stage of business known as scale, scalable growth is the answer, not effort driven growth. And the sooner you make that transition, the sooner you can realistically start to get yourself out of the day to day operations. I hope you got a lot of value out of this episode. As a reminder, we are still giving away the free 90-minute coaching session with me, as well as 3 lean out planners for everyone who leaves a rating and review and sends us a screenshot at info@leanoutmethod.com. I would absolutely love your support in being able to reach more people with the podcast, and helping them be able to scale in a more simple and sustainable way. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Simplify to Scale. If you'd like to take things further, I invite you to join me for my Scale Smarter, Not Harder interactive workshop. Head to strategicopsinstitute.com/scalesmarter to get registered. Not only will we dive into what might be keeping you trapped in the day-to-day, but you'll have the opportunity to ask me your questions live. If you got value out of today's episode, I'd love if you'd take a moment and rate and review the show so more businesses can learn to scale more simply and sustainably. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you again next week.